Have you ever been wasting away your life on social media, stumble upon a beautiful figure and wonder where you could get it, only to look at the caption and realize it's made of paper? Not once? Well, that's happened to me. Ever since I saw it for the first time, I've stumbled down this papercraft rabbit hole. It all just seems totally impossible, and yet these exist. So today, I want to find out if they're really that easy to make, or if they're being held together with dark magic like I suspect. There's definitely no secret reason for this video. Something like, I went out to buy the Link Click manhwa, realized it was $40, and decided I could find a better deal later, but felt too awkward leaving the store without buying anything, so I bought a glue pen. And now I'm trying to make back the $2.50 I spent on that pen. Totally not. Nothing like that would ever happen. Anyway, step 1 is to print out the pieces. Seems easy enough, but I've already made a mistake. I printed this on regular old printer paper. Most of the advice I've seen online tells you to print it on something a little thicker so your figure actually has some structural integrity. I refused to spend any more money on this video, so I didn't do that and just hoped I wouldn't regret it later. And just to add to the struggle, I'm doing this on what I'm gonna call hardcore mode. You see, I moved recently, and while I did steal a lot from my previous place, I was not allowed to take the printer. But who really needs one? So this is my one and only copy. If I screw it up, that's it, I'm done. This video is a fail and my $2.50 is lost forever. If you haven't been outside in a while, you might recognize this as Ganyu from Genshin Impact. Do I particularly care for her? Not at all. This was just the nicest looking free figure I could find that wasn't of some VTuber I've never heard of. The pattern is by SV and it will be linked in the description. Step 2 is to cut out all the pieces. Seems easy enough, but I managed to mess it up. Are you seeing the pattern yet? Considering all the small details, I thought this would be easier with something other than scissors. I appear to have lost my scalpel, but I had this blade pen thing I got for free that I thought I'd try out. Yeah, no wonder it was free, it sucked. It either doesn't cut through the paper or completely tears it up. No in between. So I ended up just using some small scissors, which was, difficult. Each piece has little tabs around it that are used to connect them together. I'm assuming you can't see them on camera because I could not see them in real life. My ex-printer must have decided to print these lines as faintly as possible because I have perfect vision and had to hold the pieces right next to my face to vaguely see what I was meant to be cutting. I didn't realize at the time, but this led to me cutting off many things I was not supposed to, but we'll get to that later. The cutting process alone took me 2.5 hours. Step 3, put it all together. Do I need to say it again? I screwed this up in every way imaginable. But in my defense, this part seemed impossible to begin with. Allow me to take you on this journey. I had no idea what I was doing, so the best place to start was obviously the most inconsequential piece, the face. How is this meant to become 3D? Who knows? I don't. If only there was something like instructions to tell me what to do. No, seriously, I wish I had instructions. What I got when I downloaded this thing was the pages I had to print out and a file of the 3D model. You can click on each piece to see what it is and where it should end up. But there's nothing that specifically tells you where each tab needs to be glued. You just have to give it your best guess. And so guess I did, which honestly didn't go too bad at first. I managed to shape the face and the hair quite easily. The first issue came when I noticed I had cut off a tab on the side of the hair, but this wasn't too major as I could just use a bit of a sticky note to replace it. The big problems came when I tried to put all these pieces together. The head had a support in it that should attach to the other side of the face. Either I cut it out wrong or glued everything too tight because it did not fit at all. My attempts at forcing it only led to a forehead separating, and I just could not get it back into place, but I'm sure the hair will cover it, so no worries. Not to mention I had glue all over my hands at this point, which was sticking to dust, which was then sticking to her face. So she was beginning to look a little worse for wear. After a bit of fiddling, I managed to shove her hair into what I thought was the right place. About 5 minutes later, I realized this was actually a huge mistake as her fringe was supposed to slide in underneath it. But no going back now, so I just glued down the tabs on the inside. This fringe was going to be holding everything on her head in place, and not trusting the glue pen to do it, I poured on some PVA glue instead, put it aside and hoped to God it would dry. From there, I began working downwards. I grabbed all the pieces I needed and folded them into loops to attach together later. I managed to get her chest area together too. By the time I made it to her legs, the glue pen had built up so much gunk on the end of it that the glue would no longer come out, so I switched to the trusty old blue glue stick. kinda defeating the whole secret purpose of this video, but at this point I'm committed to finishing no matter what. I really screwed up when I was cutting her knees, look at all those holes, but they still kind of held together, so it's fine. I also cut off some stuff I shouldn't have on the arms, so sticky notes to the rescue. Then it was time to start assembling the body. I put the support in first, but then realized like on the head I need to sandwich some tabs in between, so I quickly pulled it apart. Trying to get these two pieces to stay together was a nightmare. If I pushed one side down, the other would just peel off, and as a bonus I split open her titty in the process. After 20 minutes of fiddling, I finally managed to get it to stay together, albeit very wonky. I knew if it broke apart, I'd break with it, so I secured it with some tape. What's that? The third thing I've used instead of the glue pen now? This process pissed me off so much, I had to take a step away for a second, but I came back calm and ready to face anything this had in store for me. So I tried putting together her leg, and holy fuck. Her thigh would just not fit, so I crinkled it to get it in. Her calf fit, but it would not stay. Because of the angle it's on, there was no way to get the tabs to lay flat on the inside. This was genuinely infuriating. It would just fall off with the glue. So I tried adding tape to make the tabs a bit longer. This still didn't work even after shoving in my tweezers, a pencil, and my entire finger. I was on the verge of tears, so I ended up just pouring PVA glue all over it and set it aside to deal with later. I went back to work on the torso. The next part was a bit easier to get on, but I still stuck tape all over it just in case. I finished up her pelvic area, tearing it a little in the process, and ended up with a gaping hole in the front, but it was together nonetheless. Her arm was another nightmare. Same problem as the leg. Because of the angle it's on, there's just no way to get the tabs flat on the inside. Once again, I got it semi-together, poured glue all over it, and left it to dry. In the moment, I thought the paper started refusing to fold, but retroactively, I think my brain just shut off, because her stupid bell nearly made me crash out. It had 4 folds, and it took me 10 minutes. Yeah, I called it a day after that. New day. I decided to start with her feet. Trying to figure out how to turn this into this made me feel like I was having a stroke. Safe to say, I did it wrong and had to undo it all. Moving on to the hands. There were actually 2 options for these. One involved a whole lot of pieces, and you actually had to make each individual finger. The other was a flat version that you just had to make into a loop. I tried making one finger, realized I don't have the skill or patience for that, and quickly switched to the easier option. Her legs nearly made me give up entirely once again. It is just not possible to get the tabs to lie flat unless you were like folding this shit nanometer perfect, which I am clearly not doing. By this point, the glue pen had entirely stopped working. No wonder it was only $2.50, but I was more than happy to be done with it because everything I glued with it would just end up breaking open anyway. Now it's just me and my love PVA glue against the world. You know I poured that shit all over the legs to get them to stay together. The feet had these little bits that needed to sit on top, and I could not get them to stay on. They were sticking to me, to the tweezers, to the brush, but they would not stick to each other. As soon as I got them vaguely in the right spot, I just put them down to dry. I thought I'd finish up her torso, but this ended up going horribly. I could not figure out where the arms were meant to go, so I just kind of shoved them on. I looked at it and realized it was so rough. I got one off, but the glue had already dried and the other was stuck. Trying to attach this bit to the rest of her was also horrible. Look at it. How is this meant to work? I ended up gluing and taping the back, waiting for it to dry, and then gluing and taping the front. Finally giving me a break, the lower half of her arms went so smoothly. Well, I did kind of fuck up one of her hands horrifically, but that's alright. The frilly bits went on nicely and her hands slid into place perfectly. I was not at all paying attention to it, but I even managed to get her thumbs on the right side. The shoes, however, continued to piss me off to no end. They're meant to have a heel and then have the bottom covered in the sole. No matter what I did, this would not happen. I go to put down the sole, the heel falls off. With the heel on, the sole isn't long enough to reach the toes. I'm sorry, but this is not possible. I ended up gluing down the sole as best I could and left the heel kind of floating in the middle of her shoe and a giant hole in the back. Listen, I was at my breaking point. tears in my eyes. I did what I had to do. I went back to putting her arms on and still couldn't do it. On one side, a gaping hole somehow appeared in her armpit. All I could really do was glue some paper over it and pretend it didn't happen. On the other side, the arm would not fit into itself, so I forced it and now it looks dodgy as fuck. There was no indication of which direction the legs should be facing, so it took some trial and error, but the first one went on pretty easily. I kind of tore open her whole crotch trying to get the other one on, but I poured glue all over it and pretended it didn't happen. After all the pain they caused me, her feet went on surprisingly easily, and decorations even covered some of the mess. Things are looking up, because her arms also went on super smoothly. I had to crush her neck a bit, but the head made it on as well. At this point, I noticed a couple supports I just didn't use. They probably weren't important anyway. I also lost one of her ears, so I just didn't give her ears. Don't worry about it. The piece ended when it came time to attach both halves together. I'm pretty sure I was meant to sandwich the waist tabs in between the support, but it's a little too late for that, isn't it? So instead, I poured on an unholy amount of glue and just shoved it in. Shockingly, that actually worked. Then all I had to do was glue on her skirt and vision, get her on the stand, and I was done. All in all, this took me 10 hours of cutting, folding, and gluing, plus probably another 10 hours of sobbing and regretting my choices. Are you ready for the reveal? Wow. Let's not sugarcoat it, she looks terrible. She clearly doesn't stand up. Most of her is made totally incorrectly, and I managed to get glue and dirt all over her, but she's together. I didn't have to resort to using tape on the outside, and I didn't need to buy a printer to finish her, if you ignore the fact she doesn't have ears. So I consider this a win. I feel like making anything of a better quality than this is completely out of the realm of possibility for me. And for the record, no, the $250 was not worth the amount of suffering I went through to make this. Thank you for your time.